So my name is Fury Young, and I'm the executive director of Jim Crow Records and founder. And this all started in 2013 as just this one album project. And so I got into the 5 prisons, to be specific, recorded over 50 artists inside. And by 2019, it became clear that it was becoming a record label, not just one album. So we made that transition. But a year before that, in 2018, I had the honor of going to a prison called Territorial, which is in Colorado, in a prison town that's got like 6 other prisons called Canyon City. And me and my co-producer and engineer, Dr. Israel, recorded 7 musicians in 4 days at Territorial. And at that point, it was for this one album. So we got these very focused recordings that had this kind of narrative arc to them. Andy, I had met you actually a year before at a conference, but we really hit it off, Andy Dixon and I, and stayed in touch. And then after the Colorado recordings, I shared them with Andy, and eventually he came on as my executive producing partner on the album and was in charge of getting some incredible musicians in Nashville to finish out the recordings with drum, bass, and several other instruments. So that's a little bit about me. I've been completely deep into the Territorial project, which is probably why what I just explained is not really about me, but about Territorial. But that's because it's just been my life the past several months, especially the past month. I've been doing all the fine-tooth comb editing, getting the songs over to our mixer, and the album is sounding really cool, and we'll talk a lot more about it throughout the show. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Andy Doc Dixon. And like Fury said, we met at a conference and become quick buds. And since then, he's been to my house. I've been to his stomping grounds in New York, and we've hung out and had some fun and listened to some really great music. And when Fury told me about this project that he had going on, I was like, wow, that's exciting, because I had already came from an area where music helped set me free. So I was very excited about that. After spending approximately 27 years in prison myself, I was really excited when musicians came in and offered me a chance to write and create. And it was my springboard to freedom. And the music, it drills through things that nothing else can drill through. Someone once said that we're so shock resistant these days that the only thing that can possibly get to us is art. And I think music is the art that reaches people's inner thoughts, their conscious, and awakens them, to something bigger and better than themselves. And it relaxes and chills them too, which is really good. But that when Fury brought all this up about this music and I listened to it, I was like, it was like going home in a sense, if prison can be a home. It just brought me back to the place I'd been, because I remember making the music in there, and I was so glad that someone had taken notice and was wanting to go to all the prisons, not just, certain ones, but try to get in as many as possible to get this music out to the world. And he did a really, really great job of finding really good people, making some really quality recordings inside. Was a phenomenal feat all on its own, because I can tell you prison is a very loud and noisy place. And to be able to pull off getting some clean recordings out of there is awesome. And so we got together here in Nashville. I got together some friends and some people that were interested in this project. We went over to the studio, and I think we made some magic.
Yeah.
This is awesome. So tell me about the inspiration for this. I mean, how did you get the idea, and how did this all sort of come to actual fruition?
Well, like I mentioned a little bit when I was introducing myself, the project started in 2013. So originally, going way back, I got the idea to make a concept album. Sorry, let me silence my phone. I got the idea to make a concept album that was about racial injustice in the US prison system, and to work with, at the time, I was very strict about this, only formerly and currently incarcerated Black musicians. And it would be like this epic double album, very reminiscent of Pink Floyd's The Wall. I was a young, maybe dumbly ambitious, somewhat audacious activist who I had known people who've been incarcerated, all people of color. I myself never have been. But I read the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and was very drawn to it and wanted to take on an art project that involved my love for activism and social justice. And this seemed like the perfect thing. It was a very slow burn at first. Like, I didn't just immediately get this idea to work with all Black musicians who had been to prison or were in prison and just feel comfortable with it. It wasn't that way at all. It took over a year really before I decided that I would be the one to produce it. And that was due to the encouragement of people that I started to communicate with inside. So it was a long process, but to take you to 2018, which is when the Colorado recordings happened, I had at that point released an EP, which was mostly recorded at the first prison we ever got access to in Ohio, and also with formerly incarcerated musicians in Brooklyn and Philly. And it was like a teaser for this full-length double album that I still thought was just the end goal for Die Jim Crow. So we already had that, 6 tracks, real solid, a mix of different experiences, both before prison, in prison, and out of prison. And that was always how the LP was structured. It was 3 acts, pre-prison, prison, reentry. So by 2018, there was a little gap in me just getting access and to more prisons, and finally I did. And Colorado was the first one that I got access to, and it was all under the same premise of doing this concept album about racial injustice. Now, at that point, I had expanded it a bit. It wasn't just limited to Black musicians. In fact, our current deputy director and one of our artists, B.L. Sherrill, was actually very instrumental in changing my mind about that whole approach, because she's a Black woman, but she said, hey, I'm in this prison right now in Pennsylvania, and it's chock full of white ladies, you know, it's like 60% white. So I think you should kind of expand it and at least have, you know, white artists or non-Black artists be able to contribute instrumentation, or at the very least, you know. So I was like, okay, maybe that is a good idea. And funny enough, enter Michael Tennyson, who's a white guy who's been in prison since, well, 80, but then got out and then did another horrible crime and has been inside since 87. So a total of over 40 years, white guy, who I was connected to actually at the same conference that I met Andy Dixon at through another colleague of ours. And she said, I know this guy in Colorado, he's a great musician, but he's white. Are you interested? And I thought, you know, well, let me give it a shot. So ended up getting access to that prison, territorial, and went there, worked with this group of 7 musicians. Michael Tennyson was the band leader. He really got all the guys together, wrote a lot of the songs, but the group itself was extremely diverse. It couldn't have been more of a motley crew. We can get into that a bit more later, and I'm going to show you some pictures too. But we were there for 4 days. We approached it with that concept album thing in mind, with the pre-prison, prison reentry. We didn't cover all the different ideas for the Die Jim Crow LP. As Andy mentioned, I wanted to get into a lot more prisons and have it be like this big collage of different prisons and different songs. But we got quite a few tracks, and here we are now. Going to be a 12 or 13 song album. So
It's amazing. So what was it like, the initial reception, and how did you get access to the prisons and to some of these artists, particularly ones that are currently incarcerated? I'm very curious to hear that process.
Well, in 2015, 2014, I started reaching out, but I got the access in 2015 to a prison called Warren Correctional in Ohio. Just persistence, just knocking on every door.
So did you go in with recording equipment? What was it like to record in there? They let you go in with recording equipment and everything? Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I worked with a very talented engineer by the name of Dr. Israel, who brought in a bunch of gear. I worked at a wood shop at the time and had all these tools and stuff, and brought in this like makeshift vocal booth and drum booth that I built. And we just made it sound like a studio in there.
Yeah. So Andy, what was your experience then in actually making the music? So take us into what it was like to actually be, part of that process as well.
Well, Fury started shooting me these links to some of these songs that he had recorded, and I was listening to them, and they were really raw. And when I listen to music, I hear what's there, but also I hear what's not there, if that makes any sense. And so in listening to it, Fury and I would bounce these ideas off of each other about what we were thinking would be interesting to, put into the mix. And over time, we decided that the best place to do that would be maybe right here in Nashville. And so we set it up. Fury came down. I mean, it was almost like a campaign. I mean, we had it all mapped out, what we were going to do. We'd talked for hours about how this was going to come off. We were on a tight budget. And because we were on a tight budget, it was essential to map it all out, make sure that we had number one, we had the musicians lined up. Number two, we knew in our mind what it was we were trying to find, the sound we were looking for. And on game day, we walked in there and everybody was there. They were, professional. They were ready to roll. They listened to what we, had laid out, and they played their parts. You listen, you have them do a little bit more here, you tweak it a little bit more here, and you start tapping that foot, you start feeling that groove, that drum comes in, that bass sound. And then the next thing you know, you got something, because these songs are not like, I hate to use the phrase, this is nothing you've heard before, but we've all heard music before. But this is truly different because this is something that you haven't heard from the source. And this source is it's redemptive. These guys and ladies are pouring their heart out to you. They're not making excuses for what they did. They're not making they're not trying to sugarcoat anything. Definitely it's not sugarcoated. I mean, it can be shocking in some songs, but at the same time it's real. And the guys that I brought in there to do this, when it was over with, to the man, they were like, wow. I don't know the language barriers on your show, so I won't say what they said, but it was like,
you can swear if you'd like.
Well, with them, it was like, holy fuck, this is really good, and everybody has their favorites, Fury knows I got mine. And there's just this one guy, he is like he's really, really talented. I mean, they all are, don't get me wrong, they all are, but this one cat is like something else. And the woman that joins him in this piece that we put together is phenomenal. I don't know if you've heard the song yet, America the Merciful, but if you get a chance to listen to it, it is really awesome.
Yeah. So can you take us into some more of your stories then? Because obviously this is all of your works are richly laden in stories of experience and often dealing with the realities of being an inmate of past and present. What are some of your favorite stories? Can you share some of the stories that came about as part of this project?
My favorite story from this project is just getting to meet some of these people. I've exchanged letters with Dana, and he, the guy is like really good. He's got a really good sense of humor. He's looking forward to getting out soon. He he's totally redemptive. I mean, he has this desire to balance his scales. And that's something I always looked for when I was in. When people were getting out, you'd look and you go, okay, that guy will never be back, and another one, you go, well, he'll be back next week. And the reason you could say things like that is because you knew a person leaving changed or they didn't, and you can tell from talking to Dana, he's totally changed. He's all about the love and the art and balancing out the scales. He wants to spend the rest of his life trying to do good, and at the end of the day, he wants to come out even, on the good side. And so that was pretty powerful. As far as Fury and I go, we bounce around, and we become, if it's possible, tighter and tighter as the years go by, because we're like totally into this and believe in it, and I believe in it. I think I've been more of a cheerleader than anything else. I've just my contribution has been pretty small, in comparison to what Fury's been through. He's been there from day one, and I got to come in when it was all pretty. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, your contribution was enormous, though. I mean, you brought in some of the best musicians I've had the pleasure of working with.
Thank you.
And actually, even since those recordings, some of those guys have been doing some additional stuff just in their own home studios. So that's been incredible. In terms of that awesome question, Leland, for me, it's hard to know where to start, but I guess I would just have to get really specific and probably narrow it down to Michael, who I mentioned earlier. I never thought that Jim Crow would be working with someone like him, who's got 5 murder convictions, is a white guy, has absolutely nothing redemptive about his crime.
Can you maybe go a little bit into his backstory, just a little bit, for anyone who might not know about him?
Yeah, and I also have an interview thing that I pre-recorded with some photos. I don't know when you want me to share that. It may even be a good time now.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That sounds good to me. That sounds good.
Okay, let me do that then.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The most profound thing I think about that, it's amazing, first of all, that we're sitting in a prison and we're having the opportunity to record this incredible experience. 7 men coming together, some of us once rivals. When this album came together, it just seemed like the perfect universe lining up to bring everybody together and reconcile these things. And our record is about reconciliation. It started off as black and white, standard perception of racism by people that died Jim Crow. Focus was really strong, but the reality is, amongst our society, especially in light of the January 6th stuff that just happened, we see there's so many different varieties. You have the black and white, you have Christian, Muslim, Jews, you have the Republicans and Democrats and all the crazy, crazy political alliances out there that are just at odds with each other. And it was really ironic because we have 7 men, several gays, several straights, a Muslim, a Christian, people with all these differing viewpoints that are causing wars out there in the free world. And we're coming together making beautiful music. Sitting down, laughing together, crying together. And at the end, I think we were all in awe together. When we saw what we were able to create when we sat back and just allowed the natural synergy of human beings working together do what it does when that phenomenon occurs. It's really going to touch a lot of people's hearts and souls, and hopefully we can start a lot of healing around the country with it. It's desperately needed. I cry when I watch TV, and I just hope to God that we can help be part of the healing process. And I'm sure all my brothers in the group, the territorial group, all these guys, I know their hearts and souls, and they all feel the same way.
And what message would you say that you specifically were hoping to convey? Not necessarily the entire group, because you can't exactly speak for the other 6 members, but what would you say you, Michael Tennyson, was trying to convey message-wise by working on this album?
Well, in simplest terms, I've often used a quote that I've adopted that, we're not the worst 10 minutes of our lives. I've got a very dark past at one part of my life. A chapter of it is very, very dark and ugly and painful, and I've hurt many people in that. But that's not my life. It's not solely who I am. There's so much more of the story. And this album is part of that story. It's part of the things. 88, for example, it really highlights, illustrates a lot of the trauma that was going on in my mind at 87, 88, sitting in the jail. But those are the things as a child that really led me up to that fateful day when I made the decisions to go off the deep end in the first place. People don't know that. They don't understand it. They don't know the things that happen in the shadows and the dark passages of our lives, the causes that lead to the effects later on. Holy Rain was a song of redemption, a song of crying out to our higher power, to a God that I didn't even know. It's like, Lord, heal me, heal my broken soul. Please release these chains, because I can't do it. I was a mess. I had no clue. I had no way to sort my life out. I was begging God to help me come to terms with what I've done and come to terms with the life ahead of me. How I can make it something decent, something honorable, redeem it somehow if it's even possible.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of words from Michael. Maybe you should ask me the question again, Leland, so I can refocus.
Yeah.
After hearing that.
Well, I mean, that was a great dive into sort of what it was like and sort of the motivations here, which is essentially what my question was more along the lines of is, what are some of the stories that you noticed? So you've been working with these artists. I mean, both of you really have been working with these artists to tell the stories that they have. And Michael just gave an example of his story. What are some of the stories that you saw in working with these artists that came out in their music, for instance, or otherwise?
Well, let me highlight Kevin Woodley, since we talked a bit about Michael already. Kevin was the sort of main focus when we went there in terms of being the lyricist, the voice. Kevin is a Black man, about 61 years old, originally from Chicago. I bet you didn't know that, Andy. And he's a blues singer. And him and Mike were able to really form this amazing duo. And there are a couple songs on the record that are pretty much improvs, and they were like 10 minutes. And part of my job as one of the producers on the album was to really make them a bit more succinct, but they came out really well. Like Andy said, he stepped in when it was pretty, but in the beginning, we had these raw takes that were real long, because I think, talking about people's stories here, they really had a lot to say, and when you're inside, you're not really given that opportunity. So, you put a mic in front of someone's face and you get that guitar going, and next thing you know, you do have a sometimes 10-minute song. but the essence of the story and the spirit is always there. So for instance, like there's 3 tracks that come to mind from Kevin Woodley. One of them is called Mom is Crying, and it's about his experiences with police violence. It's a really heavy song. You know, it's the kind of song that you might want to do the old trigger warning for some folks. It's deep, and it's his personal experiences viewing some really horrific things. There's a song called Woodley that is a lot more fun, and it's a blues track, real like down home kind of blues, and it's basically him saying, you know, don't call me Jim Crow, I'm won't be your houseboy, don't call me Leroy, I'm not driving Miss Daisy, just defying all these stereotypes and saying I just want to be me, Kevin Woodley. So I had to give him the honor of just calling the song Woodley, because it's just so him, and he was really into that. And then there's another song called Just Say No, which is about, it's really like a chapter from the war on drugs era that actually Michelle Alexander, the lawyer and author, talks a lot about in her book, The New Jim Crow, where the war on drugs was incarcerating a lot of people. And so Kevin Woodley had some experiences about that. I believe he may have used drugs as well. And he spoke, well, sang quite candidly just about, you know, the Just Say No, Nancy Reagan era and slogan, that hokey stuff. And then another refrain in the song is "Beam me up, Scotty," which they used to say, you know, when hitting the crack pipe. So yeah, there's some Star Trek references in there. There's a little bit of everything in those Kevin Woodley songs, but they're really like ethnographies, I think.
So what did you learn in hearing these stories and in traveling the country and meeting all these inmates, both past, present inmates? What did you learn?
Who, me?
For each of you. Man, I mean, and Andy,
no.
this is, I mean, you have a unique perspective on this too. You know, what did you learn going through the process? I mean, for Fury, it's more for you in going through the process of recording this and working with the inmates that way. And then maybe Andy, for you too, it's in the process of going out and speaking with these different musicians and interacting with them that way.
Yeah, I was just being an obnoxious New Yorker. I apologize, but it's a living, breathing thing that just happens every day. You know, it's something that it's my life. So I've learned to be patient. I've learned to stick to my word. I've learned to be realistic. I've learned to undersell and over deliver. I think those are the top things that come to mind, just raw.
And Andy, do you have any thoughts?
Well, for me, it was an opportunity to give back because I was very fortunate. Mark Colley, a country music star, came to record a live at Brushy Mountain Prison back in the early 2000s, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of that. And when I got out of prison, Mark was, you know, there to give me that confidence boost that I needed to go into the music, and I was able to, you know, get my songs out there. Have 5 songs in a movie that's circulating around out there called The Hammer, and I've done pretty well with my music since I've been out, and I now have my own recording studio, as Fury knows, in Nashville, and life is good, you know. So it felt good for me to be involved in this because it gave me the opportunity to help the people that I kind of left behind, you know, because when you leave, you know, 27 years is a life investment. And I was in there for 27 years. And so when I left, those men in there, a lot of them were like family, because how can you not be around somebody 27 years and not have a familiar emotion toward all of them? even the ones you didn't like, even the ones that you knew were dangerous and you know, years ago would have been put down. But still, you have this hope that everybody in there can find that light at the end of the cave in and get out of that dark place and get into the light. And I know from my own experience and from seeing it in others that music is very cathartic. I know that it heals. I know that it bridges society. I don't care where you're at. Everybody, even deaf people, like music. They love the vibration of it. So music is truly universal, and it can be therapeutic. Well, it is therapeutic. There's no can about it. It is therapeutic. And Fury gave me the opportunity to help a little bit, and I was really, I was, and I am very honored to be a part of this Die Jim Crow album. And my wife, Linda, who Fury's met many times, we're totally behind this. I mean, Linda wrote her own book, kind of along the lines of Die Jim Crow. Fury, my mind went blank. What's Linda's book?
Fellonism.
Yeah, Fellonism, Hating in Plain Sight. Where's she at? I'm gonna get smacked around here.
I can edit it out. Don't worry.
But anyway, yeah, she wrote a really good book, Fellonism, Hating in Plain Sight. And so this desire for prison reform runs through our veins, and we're always on the lookout for things that we can get involved in and things that we can do to further that cause. And when I met Fury, I saw a guy who was all fired up and passionate and believed in what he believed in. And when he called me and wanted to get to know myself and my wife and ask us if we'd like to be involved in the project, I mean, I was absolutely, I'm in,
And I want to piggyback off that too, because you spoke, Andy, of the album somewhat in the past tense. And what's exciting to me is that I feel like our journey with this album in some ways is just getting started. I know that the Nashville sessions are, for the most part, over. But the album is shaping up to be very, very interesting, more interesting than I thought it would be, in terms of all the different perspectives just kind of coming together in this fascinating way, in my opinion. I'm biased, but I think that it is going to have quite an effect on people who listen to it. So it will be very interesting for you and I to continue these conversations with others, folks like Leland, and the public at large, and just kind of see what people's reaction is to this record when it does get released.
What's the best way of keeping up with you?
We're real easy to find. We're just Die Jim Crow on everything. Instagram, our website, diejimcrow.com, Twitter, Die Jim Crow. You can just find us there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing the story, and thanks for sharing more of your perspectives and thoughts. It's really a fascinating one. Again, I mean, I really think your work is really, really interesting and clearly very impactful. So it's been a pleasure to meet you guys, and I anticipate we'll be speaking a lot more moving forward.